Hi, Ellie.
Good morning or afternoon or whatever the hell it is.
Yeah.
We were both up at the same time in the middle of the night. Just yeah. Because you're anticipating that the Supreme Court will pour gasoline on the already gasoline-laden fire that is America this morning.
That's why I was up early, but the court released like 4 opinions today, and miraculously, none of them are terrible.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's some I disagree with. Like there's some, but it's funny to remember sometimes that like we used to live in a country where like reasonable people on both sides could disagree because we weren't fighting about like whether or not humans should be treated as people, right? We weren't fighting about the kind of basic fundamental rights that Trump makes us fight about every day. There was a time where just like Republicans believed, one kind of thing, and those were the decisions today. They were very kind of legal and technical and almost comforting. It's just like, okay. I just think Gorsuch is wrong.
Okay.
He's not.
All right, and also it was a prank. There is not a tiger on the loose in California as well. So, okay, we'll take good news where we can get it. You tweeted, "This week happens when white people do not listen, when black people calmly, professionally, charitably explain how desperate black people are for relief from white violence, how we would do almost anything to be free of it." You said, so maybe going forward, believe black people when they tell you how much you suck. I think you're correct. Ellie, I was starting the show and I said, I don't know whether it's just the preponderance of them one after the other. And I said, look, I'm a little lame-ass white girl. It's never been discriminated against. But this last one, to see this mother with his hands in his pockets like he's waiting for a bus, staring into the camera for 9 minutes on a man's neck while people are screaming to stop. I don't know whether that was just the tipping point or whether is it right after Ahmaud Arbery and, we watched the lynching on camera and then what I mean? I don't know. Is it the number of them? Is it this specific one that's the final trigger? What is it, do you think?
I mean, I don't know what it is for white people. I mean, honestly, I don't actually understand what makes one destruction of a black life matter to white people and what makes a different one not. Like I'm not in their heads enough to understand that. I think for African Americans who have lived in this country kind of long enough, every one of them is traumatic. Every one of them is triggering. Every one of them sucks. And every one of them puts you back brings you right back down to a place in your life where your life was threatened, where you were almost killed by a police officer or by a racist white person. Every black person has that story. Every black person has multiples of that story. Every time we see one of these videos, it reminds us of that. I think where we get from that reminder to the protests is that occasionally it does just boil over and you feel like you have to speak out and you have to say something. I think that the trigger is not the right word here, but I think that one of the leading factors of these protests is that we just went through 2 or 3 weeks where we saw crazy white people waving Confederate flags and assault rifles at cops because they couldn't get a haircut, right? We just all went through watching white people lose their minds because they couldn't get a mimosa.
Yeah.
And so watching that happen and then watching us get killed again, it feels like, well, hell, I can certainly go out and express my feelings if white people can get this pissed off about not getting haircuts. And when we get the cops coming at us so aggressively and violently, again, we all watched the same television, right? We all saw how cops I saw videos of cops getting pushed into lakes by white teenagers who didn't want to follow social distancing rules, right? I didn't see those white kids get pepper sprayed. I didn't see those white kids get, tased. We all saw that. And so when the cops then show up to our protests in our communities with riot gear and pepper spray and rubber bullets, like that'd make it crazy.
Elliot,
that's triggering.
I loved how you put it. You wrote a great piece for The Nation, which we linked to. They just said the headline, people can only bear so much injustice before lashing out. You said, I'd never throw a rock at the police. I would never throw a brick through the window of a big box store. I would never set a fire to an office building, but I want to. I understand how some people do.
Yeah. I mean, it takes a lot of like restraint, right?
Yeah.
It takes a lot of restraint and education and a little bit of fear of jail, like a little bit like I watched the Oz series maybe too much. Like it takes a lot to like remember that you should still be law abiding even when the law does not abide you. And I can kind of keep that together in my head kind of intellectually, but then again, I don't go to a lot of protests. Like I'm not a street level activist. And one of the reasons why I'm not, well, because A, I'm fat and I just don't like to walk very much. But like, B, like let's just be honest, there's that. But it's a physical activity. But B,
If protesting didn't involve marching, I would be all in.
It's a kind of automatic chair thing I could do. Anyway, but the second reason is that a street level protest in a crowd of black people surrounded by a phalanx of white cops is easily one of the most terrifying situations I can be in. Right? Like just straight up, it's scary. Knowing that the cops have authorization to use violent and deadly force against you,
Yeah.
and knowing that to be an effective protester, you must not use violent and deadly force to defend yourself. To be in that situation is actually quite terrifying.
Well,
and so that's why I say,
yeah,
I wouldn't throw the rock. I wouldn't be the tip of the spear on vandalism, but I absolutely understand how some people get there. It's a tense, frightening environment.
Well, I was quoting Trevor Noah when I started the show, Elliot. It made sense to me when we watch, Ahmed Aubrey's lynching on camera, when we watch George Floyd's, murder live on camera. You can understand where people go, oh, there is no social contract. So that's the social contract is what keeps me from throwing a rock into a store or looting. But I guess nothing matters anymore. There's no rules that any of us are supposed to play by. And I mean and also when you were talking about the white people screaming at cops and also if they happen to have coronavirus, that's terrorism because you're screaming in someone's face with you're not social distancing, you're not wearing a mask, and you're screaming to reopen a society in which blacks are hugely disproportionately dying of coronavirus. So there's that. I mean, you said put yourself in the position of a relatively conscious black person in America just this past March. Black people have seen a pandemic disproportionately rip through their communities while the media continually runs live press conferences of a racist president lying about the disease. We've seen layoffs, unemployment ravage our communities while Congress funnels billions of dollars to white-owned businesses. We've seen white people absolutely lose their minds, waving guns, Confederate flags of police officers, as you said, the whole thing, pushing them into lakes. While we've seen police literally sit on black people for allegedly violating social distancing orders. And this latest one, also, you're like a possible counterfeit $20 bill. This whole thing started with 4 armed cops because of that.
The over policing, and I wrote about this a month ago about how coronavirus was going to end up just to being another excuse for over policing of our communities. The way that the cops come down on African American people, or just anybody with dark skin, for minor infractions, while they look the other way completely at minor infractions for white people, and come with with a velvet glove even on major infractions for white people. It's stark and it's unmistakable. To go back to where we started, like, it's not like black people don't notice this, right? Mm-hmm. We might live in 2 Americas in our experiences, but like we got one TV, right? We all see the same thing. We see the disparate treatment. That it is the disparate treatment that is as triggering as any individual instance of injustice, right? Yeah. It's the fact that you are part of a legacy of disparate treatment. Stephanie, I've been stopped for driving while black 4 times, right? What do you think that does to me, right? Like what kind of different kind of calculuses do you think that I make, knowing that, not theoretically, but that part of my choice to get into my own car and drive around my own neighborhood is that I might be stopped, harassed, and put in danger of my life and limbs from a police officer.
Yeah. I'm going to guess
Right?
that you always use your Harvard ID when you with a giant H.
It doesn't work as well as I had hoped, but
But it works. Um, yeah. Anyway, this piece is great. Just it takes incredible strength to practice nonviolence in the face of murder and oppression. It takes an incredible, nearly irrational faith in the long arc of history will bend toward the cause of justice. I'm not Jesus. I'm not Martin Luther Jr. Turning the other cheek does not come naturally to me. It doesn't even seem logical most of the time. And you also go on to say the press incentivizes violence. The rage inspires violence. The restraint shown by black people all across this country is admirable. We're being terrorized. We're being traumatized. We're being hunted by cops who can kill us out in the open. And when we gather to complain, those cops use violent tactics to scare us and hurt us and disperse us. And I hate to even use the word president. Just I don't know what do you want to use? Lit the match? Constantly pours gasoline on the fire. I mean, it just as I always say, right? Yeah, go ahead.
No, he's bloviating fart bubble that just gases the entire. Like I don't. Yeah, he's a problem. I think we should probably not elect white supremacists. Like I think that's a bad idea. I think that the country is.
You said that. It seems like I don't know, electing white supremacists and yes, cop killer enablers. It was a bad idea, maybe all in all. Yeah.
I think we made as Bugs Bunny would say, I think we made the left turn in Albuquerque should have gone right. Yeah. I mean, look, I don't even, like you, Stephanie, I don't have like a lot of patience to even treat that man with the respect of his office, right? Like he is a bad guy doing bad things to America, and the quicker we can get rid of him, the better off everybody will be. Yeah. I don't know, there is a worry that this is the kind of, obviously Trump thinks that this helps him, right?
Yeah.
Like, obviously Trump thinks that a race war helps him.
He's quoting a racist, the most racist police chief ever from Miami. When the looting starts, the shooting starts. Then I thought, is he literally talking about vicious dogs? Releasing vicious dogs on the road? Like, is he just have the Bull Connor, George Wallace playbook out like all the time? Or
exactly. Like he's literally, and and he's counting on this kind of unrest to basically scare white suburban women into voting Republican. He's hoping that it's a straight up play for white people. It's a straight up play for white suburban people, women especially. And he's hoping that they see violence in the streets and they blame the black people as opposed to blaming the cops. They're hoping that they see looting and white people go like, oh, them darkies just need to be put in line. They're hoping that that's the reaction as opposed to, man, we need massive structural change. And quite frankly, I don't know that he's wrong. I no longer have the kind of like charity of trust of my white neighbors to know that Trump is wrong on this. So we will see.
Yeah. Well, you tweeted, I'm black, so no one will listen to me. But maybe next time one of your cops murders us in broad daylight on camera, and we all know there will be a next time, try arresting the cop and his accomplices. Our friend Maya Wiley just this morning, Elie, on TV, was saying she doesn't, because I want your lawyer hat now. She said, I don't understand why this, to start, was not a second-degree murder charge. That why we're at third-degree murder, because I get that first degree is premeditated, that you may not be able to prove that right now. Yeah. But second, I mean, Elie, he's on his neck for 9 minutes, and after he stops moving, how is that not second-degree murder?
I can't even, like, how is he not arrested at the scene, right? Like, the none of this happens, and I emphasize this to basically anybody who will listen. I don't think any of this happens if those 4 cops are arrested the day the video comes out.
Excuse me, when you see the other video, I'm seriously asking as a lawyer, Elie, what they did not just let him get away with it. They were participating. They were kneeling on other parts of his body. How is that not like?
I get accomplices.
It. Right, that's exactly accomplices, right? That they're not just okay.
You can't do that. In a normal civilized society, you can't do that. There's no reason for them to. I mean, you're asking. It's almost like you're wondering, is there some like really deep cut part of the law that maybe you don't understand? That no, there is not some deep cut part of the law that you don't understand. This is not some issue of like there's an old dusty tome where Oliver Wendell Holmes said no. This is just straight racism. Your surprise and outrage is correct. This is straight racism. If these people were black, if these people were not cops, they would have been arrested for the crime that we all saw them commit on video. Simple as that. 1, 2, 3. There is no way to explain what's happening in the legal system without remembering that they are predominantly white cops and they're being charged and tried as cops. And that's a whole different category in terms of what the system does.
Yeah. By the way, in terms of the him always making everything exponentially worse, you said at this point it would be appropriate to call the National Guard to stop the police. I mean, we are fully in the upside down. That you're like, oh, that really bad things that's causing the country to burn down. We're going to make that worse. We're going to send in, the National Guard to back up those people, right, and to further turn on the people that are protesting the original sin, right?
The police are the ones that, in a lot of cases, are inciting the violence. They're escalating the violence. Like, yes, there are some protesters, and I don't even know if they're protesters. I don't know if they're infiltrators. I don't know. I mean, there's a whole other thing going on, right? But there are some people who are independently starting some vandalism, but those people are small, and what the main of the people are doing are peacefully protesting, but the situation gets escalated and pushed out of control by cops who adopt an aggressive posture, by cops who show up looking to be aggressive, and then by the very fact that we've got cops who are, in the same way that we have some protesters that are just out there to like cause a ruckus, like we obviously have some cops who are just out here to crack some heads. We've seen cops flashing white supremacist signs. We've seen cops driving cars into crowds of people. We've seen all of these kind of state-sponsored terrorism tactics.
Yep.
And that's part of the problem.
Oh, never enough time for you. I know, and because I know you have a schedule, you got to get in the sprinklers with your kids because that's their plaything today. So, all right. Thank you, Elie. Feel better, honey. Get some sleep.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a nice one.
All right. Bye.
Stay safe.
Yeah, you too.